the way that I'm sort of connected into this conversation today is through the role that I have at the college. I'm an educator, but I also carry a title of Sustainability Coordinator. The role of Sustainability Coordinator isn't a common one in schools in South Australia or Victoria. The reason our school has identified its importance is through a document as a Catholic school the Pope published about 5 years ago called Laudato Si, which translates to care for our common home. And so through the dissemination of that publication, the community said, okay, how do we respond to this document? It's calling us to action. What do we, as an extension of the Catholic Church, how do we respond? That's where I was fortunate to get a tap on the shoulder to say, would you be interested in a role like this? And so I really enjoy that role that I have. It allows me to interact with 3-year-olds through to 18-year-old students, and then that continues from 18-year-old staff into 80-year-old staff, would you believe? That also then allows me to spend time in broad community settings like this, speaking with people like yourselves, but also working alongside schools locally, nationally, internationally, industry, local government, so there's a little bit of flexibility and play in that role. The list today that Gavin's put together and tomorrow are some exceptional members of this community and beyond the community, so I feel very honoured to be able to present and share some of my opinions and my views about engaging young people in sustainability, but also the natural world. And by the end of this talk, I hope that we can explore some opportunities that might exist within the Nelson region. To give you a bit more of an understanding about me and how I developed such an affinity for the natural world and my links with education, I'm going to share a publication or some words, a story that I shared in a publication recently about how the outdoors has impacted my role as an educator. It's a bit long-winded, but I'll read it out. So, as I mentioned, I grew up in a house my parents built on top of an old shearer's quarters. We had paddocks around us filled with crops and cattle as far as the eyes could see. On the horizon, I could see the Canunda Range where the wind farms now sit. Located 10 k's from the nearest town, us children relied on the outdoors to entertain ourselves. When I was little, my parents would say when they would find us cooped up inside, "I don't want to see you inside until tea time." And that might seem harsh and a far reality from the parenting style of today, but it's given me something that I couldn't get in any other way. It's given me a sense of wonder, a sense of beauty, and a lifelong friendship with the natural world. This sense of wonder and appreciation for nature has continued to guide me every day since. Over the past few years in my role at the college, I've asked students and staff members about a moment in their life that have filled them with wonder. And more often than not, there is a direct link to the outdoor environment, to outside, to nature, to creation. Finding wonder has always been easy for me. It can be found anywhere, in the simplest places and in the many activities that we undertake every day. You just need to know where to look. And of course, wonder is amplified tenfold when you head outside. As a child, each time I stepped outside, the outdoors quickly became a mix of the magical and the practical. A densely leafed shrub was a hideout from monsters, our dogs, and every now and again, my mum. A large willow tree at our home was a home away from home. Everything was dragged up there, including the dog and my entire set of motorbikes. Also, it was where I would go when I would get cranky or when I decided to run away from home. The drain across the road from us was where magical creatures lived and where my brother and sisters would often set off on hunts for aquatic animals. The muddy paddocks beside our home was an ideal place for baking mud cakes and jumping in puddles. We had a perfect herb pot which we would attempt to utilise in our own cooking. It's where I experienced my first bee sting. It's where we became little explorers and collected an extraordinary array of objects, some of which I still cherish today. With no structured play, we unwound, we recharged, and we simply spent lots of time sitting still and watching nature do its thing. Being outside taught us a lot of lessons about the environment and about our place within it. We learnt not to fear the outdoors, but to respect and embrace it. We took the advice of our parents and we didn't eat anything first without checking whether it was okay. And we never touched the furry caterpillars. We fought with free-range hens, ducks, geese for a clean patch of grass, and they still rewarded us every day with delicious eggs. We tended our small veggie patch with enthusiasm and love, and the resulting vegetables were cooked up and eaten as simple meals, and they filled us with pride every time. This is my little rant. This is for parents at the school. I know the world we live in today is different to the one that I grew up in just 20 years ago and was the angelic child mentioned above. But I wonder if we are doing our children any favours by allowing unrestricted screen time. A recent statistic I read said the average child spends 46 hours a week in front of a screen and just 4 to 6 hours a week outside. Sounds very similar to Nick's example of his Chinese companions. At the risk of sounding like a Grinch, I wonder what the next generation is missing out on through an overindulgence in screen entertainment. As a father of now 2 18-month-old girls, I'm yet to fight the screen/no screen battle. But I wonder what the world would look like for them, or for their children. I wonder if the world we create today and accept is one with less life, less beauty and less places to wonder, have we really done our job in creating a better world for our children? So that a bit of a long-winded rant, but I think you can sort of feel the value that I see and place in the outdoor spaces, and I hope my parenting style reflects that, but also the way that I engage with young children and older children and young adults and older adults in my interactions at the college. So in my role at the college, at Tennyson Woods College, we look at ways to engage young people in sustainability or environmental related themes, and we do so, as most schools do, through a curriculum. Okay, our goal is to create an innovative curriculum that bridges the real world, and that bridge is sustainability. I believe our young people need to be made more aware of the changing world and the poor decisions that are being made every day. Our students are now more informed than ever through media and other avenues about the changes affecting our local region, as well as other regions across the globe. Tennyson Woods College students are active in the community regarding sustainability and environmental related issues. Whether it's speaking to local council, running petitions or writing letters to local MPs, our students now have a voice. I've learned that giving students the opportunity to stand up and speak for what they believe in is much more powerful than me speaking for what I believe in. Last year, some senior school students put together a short video about the changes and their concerns in our local environment. I'll show this next video. It only goes for a couple of minutes. In fact, you'll notice that I've got lots of videos that go for a couple of minutes. The imagery in here wasn't produced by the school, it was produced by Ockart LaRue in Mount Gambier, fantastic drone and aerial photographer. The students have just done the work of writing a script and speaking over top.
The Earth we know today is an incredibly complex and fragile network of interconnected systems that have developed slowly over the last 4.5 billion years.
From the ashes of the Big Bang, this planet emerged as a mass of energy and elements with all the building blocks that make our planet unique.
This planet would continue to unfold for billions of years in such a special way that eventually conditions would arise to foster a miracle we call life.
From the smallest microorganisms to the largest animals, all life on Earth has a common ancestor.
Everything is connected to everything.
So how is it that our species has come to dominate the landscape in such a short period of time?
Furthermore, what gives us the right to do so?
In 3.5 billion years of life on Earth, everything has followed a natural course of evolution.
However, our rapid success as a species has begun to affect all corners of the globe.
In our local area, the limestone coast, we know our environment is changing.
Being the driest state and the driest continent in the world, our region is expected to have less rainfall, with a projected reduction of 21% in spring.
By 2050, the limestone coast is expected to have twice the number of days above 35 degrees.
Our beautiful coastlines will be at further risk of damage due to storm tide, inundation, as well as surge events happening much more frequently.
And our fragile marine ecosystems are also changing, with ocean surface temperatures expected to increase and our oceans becoming more acidic.
With our global population of 7 billion and climbing, we have played a tremendous role in the disruption of the Earth's natural systems.
As we continue to grow and have greater impact on Earth's system, it is imperative that we address our role and relationship with nature. The Limestone Coast community is doing its part to help slow the effects of a changing planet. Our world is relying on everyone to do their part.
So you can see, incredibly powerful. The kids were given the video as a prompt and a provocation. They had to research challenges that they're facing locally. So I really like how the voice that little activity and that powerful video footage helps young people to really identify what's at stake and what the value is locally to them. I've got one more example of what an innovative or an environmental oriented or sustainability oriented curriculum looks like at the college. Through the relentless efforts of committed staff, students, parents and myself, we somehow convinced our college board and broader community to commit to being off-grid by 2030. That was 2 years ago. That's not a small task for a school as large as ours. We are the biggest school south of Adelaide and west of Ballarat or Geelong. We have a huge energy footprint, and although we've put a lot of strategies in place to reduce our consumption, we've realised that our key now into the future lies in the generation of power. So we developed a program called Electrotech that aims at year 10, 11 students, and we engage several local electricians to assist, and the project culminates, which you're about to see, in a week-long solar install for each of the student teams involved. The program's been running for 18 months, and the school is now capable of generating 70 kilowatts of power through the solar panels, and 225 solar panels have been installed, all by students. Yeah. The prompt for the videos is about saying a school can be more than just a place where information is shared and unpacked. I'm realising that through action and giving young people opportunities to create really positive change, I get so much more fulfillment, and I think the young people do. So I'm really proud of that program and the way it's been put together, but also by the responsibility and ownership the young people in those teams have taken. We've seen such a high level of maturity. Obviously you can see that safety is most paramount of importance. Same, I guess, with Nick's programs that he runs too. Is that the programs wouldn't exist if anyone would have hurt themselves. So we've ran 7 installs now, and we haven't had an incident, and we hope to run 70 more installs and still have no incidents. But it's by ensuring that we set the bar really high for young people, and we put them into a work, again similar to Nick, a work-based situation as opposed to a classroom where you're a student. This week that the students are involved in these installs, they become apprentices. Well, that's the language that we use. But I believe it's through unique and action-oriented curriculums like this that schools can really create that change. 2 things come out of this program, and that's voice and power, and they were themes that I mentioned earlier. there are also two things I don't think that students, young people in general, have a lot of or feel that they have a lot of. One particular student in the install that took place last week that I was involved in made a really compelling comment, which I think they had no idea of its significance, but I've written it down and I'm going to use it 50 times over. They said, before I was involved in the program, I felt the only place I would leave my name on the school was on my locker or my desk. But now I know that I've left my mark on the school through a solar panel. And I thought, oh, that is so cool. Like I couldn't pay you enough to write that. But you know, it gives such validation to not only the students involved in the program, but the program itself. On a not school-related theme, I wanted to introduce this book. It's called The Last Child in the Woods, and it's by an author and researcher called Richard Louv. So research into the area of young people and their dwindling connection with the local environment is not a mainstream issue. But as a community, we acknowledge that it is an issue. There are researchers that spend time looking into this, but they are far from common. This book is a great entry point for anyone thinking about the challenges that people are faced with in regards to how to engage, as Gavin's question to me, how to engage young people in the natural world. But at the same time, it's hope-filled as well. It provides a lot of statistics based in the US and a slightly different environment, not only socially and environmentally to this one, but it does a really good job of highlighting some of the challenges. I do have a video, I'm not going to share it, about that little text, because I can smell that barbecue and it smells pretty good. But Richard Louv coins a term, nature deficiency disorder. Challenges like lawsuits, you know, like things that you would think people do with good intention, you know, come for a walk, you don't think you're going to hurt yourself, suddenly become a liability and open themselves to litigation. And the same thing's happening with schools, outside of schools, community play areas, playgrounds. You don't have to look too far in your local environment. Other challenges that he lists are things like technology, as I mentioned myself before, organised and structured sports. You might not see those as a barrier to young people engaging in the natural world, but it is. You know, structured sport has so many rules that are governed by an external, you know, body, which is the rules of the game, but it isn't necessarily conducive to getting young people outside and in nature. They're outside, but they're on a turfed field. You know, there's no nature in that environment. They're outside, but they're not in nature. Halfway there. Different parenting styles are part of the problem. Changes to the urban environment, and again, as it's not so apparent in Little Old Nelson, but as the urban environment becomes more densely populated, we lose the barrier between nature and town or nature and city. Anyway, there was one really interesting quote, almost as good as my quote, from the book, and it says, a young child, aged 10 years old, he goes, "I like to play inside better because it's where I get the best Wi-Fi." You know, so that really tells us about that disconnect that young people have with what is outside and what opportunities are there, and how do we reconnect young people with those things. Richard Louv also talks about the 90s being a really challenging time for this notion of unrestrained play, I guess, and probably that was why I might have just scraped in as this sort of wild child at the end of an era. He talks about that idea of concerns of child abduction or child abuse by having unsupervised children playing in different spaces, whether it's in your backyard, in the park across the road, or down the street, or even walking to the shops. And he does a really good job of saying that was such a great fear campaign, and yeah, there were lots of people. There were some people who were significantly affected by people that were child abductors and child abusers, but most often than not, those abductions or abuse cases happen by people within the close proximity of the family, whether it's a auntie, uncle, grandparent, you know, all of these things, and yet we're scared about that unknown person by sending them outside. So that was a really, for me, a wake-up call to say, you know, the fear's not out there. The fear is, you know, in theory, it's all around us. You can't escape it just by not letting your kids be unsupervised for 10 minutes. And he also goes on to talk about, and I can attest to this statement, about the changing parenting styles. So I had a parent share with me that they let their children at 7 years old walk around the corner to school for the first time a few months ago. And another parent saw these 7-year-old children walking with a backpack nearly as big as them, thought they were lost, called the police came, and you can see that change of mentality of what does it mean to be a parent that gives your child some responsibility as opposed to giving them nothing. And that's society that we live in today. And there's so much that a child loses in that. They lose the opportunity for risk management. We're getting young people that have full freedom when they turn 18, and suddenly their risk management is, really poor because they've never had an opportunity to make decisions for themselves in the past. So, interpersonal skills and awareness and understanding for the outside world and the natural systems. These are all important attributes that young people can only get through personal experiences in the outdoors. That's my daughter, that's Alexandra. She's one of two. I've got twins, as I said. This is, I can't get enough, and the weather doesn't help at some stages, but of opportunities to get my kids outside. In our backyard, it's sort of jumping over dog poo, so we sort of this is a valley lake. It's a really lovely place. I see a different side of my children during these experiences and after these experiences. And they're not even experiences. I shouldn't call them experiences because they're just what it means to be a child, but I feel like it's not necessarily what many people would say is to be a child. Your activity was to find a photo on your phone, but I think I'll skip that for time. In June, July of this year, just gone, I spent 4 weeks in the States. I was fortunate to be given a fellowship that paid for me to get to the States, and I travelled the States from west to east, and I visited leading schools and community groups who were doing really great things in this space of environmental education, sustainability education. Really it's just bringing it back to basics, but they were doing it really intentionally. I concluded my 4-week trip with an intensive course at Harvard University in Boston. The course was a 1-week intensive on site, and then I had to do a really painful 7 weeks external via a webcam. I wouldn't encourage intense long distance study while you're trying to work and you've got kids and all that jazz. But I was really fortunate to spend time in these organisations and schools and find out. I've got some really good takeaways I want to share with you because I think they're relevant to what's happening here in Nelson and how you guys, you've got a really great story to tell and you've got a really great environment that people need to be in, but it's about probably connecting those two and maybe how that can be done in a different way. So my takeaways from this experience are to embrace your local context. And from I've been in and out with children, but from the stories I've been hearing, you have a really unique and special context and you know it better than anyone. Like just to listen to the conversations about the road height and, the water coming, those concerns are probably not concerns of people in other communities. They don't have as close affinity or connection with the natural world as you guys obviously do here in Nelson. But from the videos that I've showed today, as unprofessional as they are, it's really important to try to capture and tell those stories. I saw a little bit of your photo story from the walk and I think that's really cool and really professional. So I want to take stock of some of that. But those stories help people to understand that the point from A to B isn't ever clear cut, and often the journey, goes to X, Y, and Z before it gets to B. And I think that's really validating and encouraging for anyone else trying to pursue challenging ventures like you guys have in your long stories with Nelson Coast Care. The other thing that's really important too is the power of a champion, and I'm going to talk about who I think one of your champions is in a minute. As I travelled across the States, every one of these organisations or schools that I spent time in, they had a champion, and it was really important because that champion inspired, they acted as a catalyst to every other person in that community about giving them a bit more energy to create more change. And that brings me to my next slide.
It's down here. The best achievement, of course, is the Nelson Coast Care. because that was the one that was going to cause or help or create or at least get things moving to get people aware of the ecology of this area. Ecological literacy is absolutely important. If we are going to maintain a world in which we are going to be able to sustain a quality of life, then we need to have an understanding of the ecology. And not only just doesn't mean interactions with the soil and the microbes and plants and so on, but it's also the impacts of human activities. Every biological character that you can preserve actually has a repercussion where it will preserve others. So we try to achieve as much protection of what we have now as much as we can. We've got people who didn't have that knowledge beforehand, now are armed with that knowledge, and we are like a very interactive and supporting community. It is actually involving people, and they've got a sense of belonging, a sense of achievement, a sense of pride. And I've seen this in some of our members.
I'm sorry if you've already seen that video today, but I'm not sorry if you've seen it many times before today. So I don't have the pleasure to be able to speak on behalf or to have even known Lila and her story, but what an incredible woman and created such action in a community, but also she is the champion that I don't know your community, but from this video, she is a champion in this community. One quote from that video, which I think is really critically important in the space of my conversation today, is ecological literacy is absolutely important. And so that term, ecological literacy, is about people using words and having experiences and knowing about how the natural systems work and are at play. She says if we're going to maintain the world that has a high quality of life, we need to understand that ecology doesn't just mean interactions with the soil and microbes and plants, it means the interaction with humans as well. So I thought that was a really powerful statement, and again, like I said, I believe you've probably all seen that, but when Gavin shared that, I felt like it was music to my ears. She is now my champion. It wasn't in that particular part, but earlier in the video she says that everyone involved in this project had a sense of belonging, a sense of achievement and a sense of pride. I think in a smaller way, but a similar way, that's what these young people experienced at my college through those solar panels. They didn't know it before, they didn't know it when they were doing it, but they walk away from it really proud. This will be a very quick but interesting conversation. So these are shared by the NRM, so Natural Resource Management, so South Australian. You guys have your own different setup with that. But it was really interesting. I think you could ask any local children, or I shouldn't say any, most local children here, Portland, Mount Gambier, to name 5 native local fauna, and they would struggle, okay? If you asked for them to share with you some endangered flora or fauna, I think they would really struggle, okay? And that probably starts at school, but the challenge for us is that these resources aren't available, or at least they're not available easily within our system. The knowledge is probably in the room, or the knowledge is with the departments or local councils, but there's a disconnect between how that conversation happens. Sadly though, if I asked kids in Portland, Nelson, Mount Gambier, Melbourne, Adelaide, can you name 5 Pokemon? You know, Pokemon, for the people in the room, is a mythical game where kids throw and catch pretend animals, and they keep them and they trade them and battle them. Or I don't actually know exactly how it works. Samara, you're youngest in the room, you could tell us. But Pokemon, I could unreservedly say they could tell you these mythical made-up pretend animals, okay? Which they, at its peak, Pokemon Go was a little game that kids and adults use their phone and augmented reality. So they would get to a point where an animal was and they would see it in their camera. You wouldn't see it, they would. It's in their phone. And they would catch it, but it had 40 million users worldwide each week. You know, that for a game of animals that doesn't even exist. So what could the Pokemon Go version of Nelson look like? How do you use this as a tool to get young people here? I don't know, but I think if they can do it with make-believe animals that have no character and no story and no future, how can they do it? How can you do it? How can we do it with living animals? Really, the last bit I wanted to share was this story. It is a South American folktale called The Parable of the Hummingbird, and I want to share it because I want you to all leave full of energy. So that is a really quick ending story that I hope gives you lots of energy. So what can we do? We can do lots of things. You know, you are a tight-knit community that, you know, no one else exists in this community that is going to do stuff for your special place. So how do you engage young people in it? I don't have any magical solutions, but I do have a lot of people in the room that have a lot of energy and passion. We've got this fantastic campsite. You know, I've got some stuff to share with Gavin later. You know, could it be as easy as some self-guided handbooks for young families or travellers passing through that they can go and see particular location or undertake particular challenges or experiences? Call me crazy, could it be a summer camp that looks like a 2-day thing or a 2-week thing where you've got local experts here that connect with Nick and you get young people that their families, they buy into the program, they want to be involved and they want to leave their mark on this region for the best. Nelson doesn't have a school, that's no surprise to you guys. So how do you bring people here? Because at the moment, I think not enough young people are coming here. So how do we make that happen? That's the challenge. There's a really trendy word in schools called STEM. It stands for science, technology, engineering and mathematics. It's not new, it's just it's a catchphrase. It's a new thing, a catch-all for all these curriculum learning areas. But how do you grab hold of some of that buzz? You know, how do you reach out to schools or local government to say, we've got a resource here and we've got support here and we've got the right people here, but we don't have young people here. So I don't have an answer, but I'm open to any questions. I think I can smell that barbecue, Gavin. But Gavin's also got my details. I'm happy to take any questions at any other point as well as today, or if you think you can add to my list of strategies.
Thank you very much.
No worries.